know when you're done if there's any more food.
There will be more, and you shall have.
You're almost finished.
A cookie?
Shimshon.
Shimshon's in it.
That's good. That's good. It's okay. I'm in the
Pan's been in it.
This Torah is brought to you by Sodia Torah.
And cookies.
Building independently, skillfully.
This Torah is not brought to you by Ezra V'Yah.
And that's what I should actually do for recruiting. I should just bring along my wife's chocolate chip cookies.
Oh, for sure.
You would need to get a new campus.
It'll be the end of it.
Shimshon, it's like the Snapple of donuts.
Yeah.
And if you come to this yeshiva, you'll have more in my life.
Because the recipe is closely guarded trade secret.
It's just like that sign.
Is the recipe a closely guarded trade secret?
That's why I want the all for you sign. It's like help out.
Bill, have you had these cookies
There are
yet?
2 dirty cups.
Guys,
I have some more. Yeah, I can do it. I've had some more.
Rabbi, we have a new addict.
How can you not eat chocolate?
I don't know.
You get a cup for Remy.
Much my kids.
1 cup, please.
I could just get it right now.
Okay.
All right.
Look at that. It's just that.
Okay. I need a chumash. I need a chumash with Rashi. Easy to get. I didn't ask you to get. And
I
I
actually
need
think I might try it.
a tiny one.
Oh,
I have to read like from Maseches Sofrim, which is like.
oh, I'm sorry. Let me get a big one.
Yeah, I'm gonna print that big. No, you know what? I'll use it. I'll use it anyway. I don't want to make you get up because I don't want to wait. And I need Maseches Brachos, which we have tons of anyway. So I need this one right here. Good. And I also need a Maseches Nida.
That's one.
Shmuley, could you get me a Maseches Nida, please?
This is so soft and chewy and
Thank you. Okay, here we go.
Not the small one. Akiva, not the small one.
This year, as I mentioned before, that's fine. For this, the small one's fine. Thank you. Just tell Shmuley not to bother.
Shmuley, got it.
Okay, good. Okay, here we go. This year, I got it. Thanks, Shmuley. This year, I'll tell you how this year originated, so that you'll appreciate what I did to prepare this year, because that sort of helps tell you what this year is about. Now, there are numerous characters, numerous people, who, although they might be mentioned in 1 or 2 psukim in Tanakh, and aren't really prominent characters in the text, if you just read the Torah or the Tanakh, Chazal took these people and created like a whole world around them and turned them into major characters. There's a number of examples of this. You guys remember my show from last year, like Serach is an example. The awesome stories about Serach, and there's a Psuk and they mention her, and they don't even say anything about her. Og is mentioned in a couple of Psukim in the Chumash, all in the same area of the Chumash. Nothing very remarkable about him. There's one actually very remarkable thing, which is probably the jumping off point that Chazal used to create a whole personality. But what Chazal do sometimes, and sometimes they'll even do it with someone who doesn't appear in Tanakh, they'll just create a human being. They'll create a personality that plays a certain role. One thing that I want to get across to you guys throughout the year, also as with our Midrashim and Torah research skills, as compared to Torah, and through many of these Thursday night shiurim, is that Chazal in the Midrashim are speaking in the language of symbolism. So when they create a character, when they embellish and build up a certain character and create all sorts of stories about a certain character, they're creating a message built around a fictional, semi-fictional personality. Okay? Does everyone understand what I'm talking about? So here's what I did. I decided a few years ago, I thought it would be a really cool thing if for a shiur I just went through all the Midrashim and all the Gemaras and everything in Chazal I could find about Og, and just did a shiur where we just went through all these cool stories about Og. It would be fun. Okay? So I started reading through every Midrash and every book of Chazal I could get my hands on and find everything I could find about Og. And after I read all these stories about Og, I said, okay, now how am I going to organize the material? This story, that story, this story. I can't just like sit down and say, okay, story number 1, story number 2. So what I did was I organized all of the chazals about Og in like chronological order of where they fit into Og's life. So like there's a medrash about him, you know, like being saved in the Mabul, right? So like that would go here. Okay, and then there's like the stuff about him fighting against Am Yisrael. Okay, that goes there. Like, you know, so I put it together so that we could look at like a life story of Og. And then once I had done that, I reread the midrashim in that order as though I was reading a biography of Og. Right? Get it? And what happened as I was reading it was I started to see that there was a theme. There were actually two themes that are really, they're sort of one. They're like two parts to the theme of what Og. Eitan, could you please pull the table that's in front of the air conditioner out so that the air from the air conditioner can run free, as it were. Thank you. Good. That's good. That's good. That's good. So I read through all this, and I noticed that there's actually a very strong theme that Chazal are presenting to us through all of these stories that is clearly seen when you look at the whole scope of the stories, and a very deep lesson. And it will help us understand a lot of the strange symbolism in some of the stories when we're done. Okay, so that's the shir. So what we're going to do is, it's going to start off, I'm just going to be telling you the story of Og's life. As we get to the end, the theme is going to start to become clear. Okay? The first appearance we have of Og, and again, when I say first, or second, or third, it has to do with Og's life, not where they appear in text. Well, let's start with the following. Let me ask you guys a question. Where does Og appear in the Chumash? In Psukim. Yes, sir. No, that is a medrash. Where does the human being Og appear in the Chumash? Yes, Aaron.
Og Melech HaBashan.
Where does Og Melech HaBashan appear?
It's where he is. When they're trying to get to Eretz Yisrael, if they ask him if they can pass through his land.
They don't ask him if they can pass through his land. They do ask other people. Og, they just attack and kill. Okay.
Okay, well that's good too.
Og, they just wipe him out. Okay, so that's the first appearance, and actually only appearance of Og in the Chumash is Og as victim of the Jewish people's conquest of Ever HaYarden. Okay, the Jewish people attack Sichon, Melech HaAmori, and Og Melech HaBashan. They attack their property and they conquer it. That's
he's
it.
mentioned some more times in Tanakh.
He is?
In reference to
He's mentioned like in some Prakim in Tehillim that talk about us conquering his land. That's it. That's what he's mentioned as in Tanakh. He's the king of Bashan and whose land we conquered.
It's like, like we're scared of you because that's what you did.
Okay, no, there's no need for this now. It'll just distract him from this year. Put it away. Put it away. We're not going to be in the Psukim very much anyway. We're going to be mostly in Chazal. Okay. There's one other pasuk. So that's in Bamidbar. And then in Dvarim, and this is really where Chazal, this was the jumping off point for Chazal to create this whole character. There's a very, very strange pasuk. It's really weird. Okay, it's in Dvarim, Perek Gimel. Here it is. It's Dvarim, Perek Gimel, Pasuk Yud Aleph. Okay? Moshe Rabbeinu at the beginning of Sefer Dvarim reviews... Could you close that window? Moshe Rabbeinu at the beginning of Sefer Dvarim reviews many of the events that happened during the 40 years in the desert. Right? He goes over and he's giving this speech to the Jewish people right before he dies, and he reminds them of this event and that event and bad things and good things, right? And when he mentions, so in that Chazara on the events that took place in the desert, which he doesn't do in order of how they took place, he does it in a thematic order. He talks about the conquest of Bashan, and he says as he's telling them about it, he says he talks about in the previous two psukim to the pasuk I'm about to read. He talks about all the names of the cities and all of the Kol Arei Mishor, Kol Gilad, Kol Bashan, Ad Salcha, Edrei, Arei Mamlechet, all the cities of the king Og in Bashan. And then the next pasuk says, listen carefully to this pasuk. It's totally whacked out. Okay? Forgive me. It's crazy. Ki rak Og melech Bashan nishar miyeter Rephaim. For only Og, the king of Bashan, remained from the giants. Hinei arso eres barzel. Behold, his crib was a crib of iron. Halohi, behold it is, berabat b'nei Ammon, in the capital city of the people of Ammon. Teisha amot orka, it's 9 amot long, va'arba amot rochba, and 4 amot wide, ba'amat ish, in an amma of a regular person, meaning not in an og amma, because the word amma actually means an arm's length. Okay, is this a strange pasuk? They're telling us that Og was the last of the giants, and then the pasuk goes ahead and tells us. Now, there's other meanings of the word eres, and the Mefarshim have a hard time with this word, but the simple meaning of the word eres is that it's a bed or a crib. So the way Chazal understand this pasuk, and it's actually quite the simple pshat of the pasuk, even though the pasuk is very, very odd, that Og, who was this giant, as we'll see soon, and the pasuk says he was one of the Rephaim, he was a giant. Okay, like his crib was some sort of like monument or tourist attraction that remained in the capital city of Ammon, and that the Torah is telling us how huge this guy was. That his crib was 9 amot long. Now, an amma is about 1.5 feet, so 9 amot would be about
14, 15 feet.
about 13.5 feet, right? That makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's long. Okay, this room is 7 meters long. Okay, this from window to window. Okay, this window's behind this book. It's 7 meters long. Okay, it's about 21 feet. So this thing's about from this window till like just past Oren. That's how long his crib was. And it was 4 amot wide, so it's like 6 feet wide. Okay? That's a big crib. This was one large baby, and it was made out of iron. Like a cage. You don't usually make cribs you don't need to make them out of a substance that strong. So this pasuk is telling us that this guy was big. Now this is the only indication in the psukim that Og was a large person. Up until this pasuk, Og is just another name of a king of a conquered land, just like there's other names of people in the Torah. Okay, so that's why I say this pasuk is the pasuk that is really the jumping off. So we'll start with that as a way for 2 reasons. Number 1, it's the only mention in the Chumash. Number 2, it's the beginning of his life, his crib. Og was a large baby. Now, what's the next mention of Og? Chronologically in his life, the next time we see Og, we see him in the story of the Mabul. Raise your hand if you heard at some point growing up that Og survived the Mabul. Okay? Virtually every hand goes up. Anyone who hasn't raised their hand just did it out of embarrassment because everyone else is putting their hand up, might as well. But basically, there's this famous idea in the Midrash. It appears in a bunch of places, by the way. Most midrashim, any midrashic story, like if it's a doozy, usually appears in like 3 or 4 places, and then it's the job when you're putting together a shir to pick out the best version of it. But the idea that Og survived the flood appears in the Gemara in Nida in passing. It appears in the Gemara in Sanhedrin in passing. And it's more explicitly dealt with in a book called Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer. Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer is an old midrashic sefer. Some of the best midrashic stories come from Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer. It's attributed to being the teachings of Rabbi Eliezer, a gadol, who was a Tan. Okay? It's a very old medrash. It's in Hebrew. And it's pretty easy to read, especially if you have a nice minukad version like I have. Here we go. So it says here, and this is the basis for that idea that you were taught from kindergarten that Og survived the flood. Here we go. Vayimachet kol hayikum, and God destroyed all of the existence that was on the earth, chutz mi Noach v'chol asher ito b'teva, except for Noach and everyone who was with him in the ark. Shene'emar, as it says, vayishaer ach Noach v'asher ito b'teva, as the pasuk says, and only Noach remained and whoever was with him in the teva. Now the Midrash continues. V'chutz me'og melech HaBashan. And except for Og, the king of Bashan, she'yashav lo al eitz echad min hasulamot shel hateva. That he sat on one of the rungs of one of the ladders of the teva. I guess the teva had like ladders on the outside of it, like the way boats often have ladders on the outside of it. Okay? V'nishba leNoach u'levanav. And he swore to Noach and his children, she'yeh lahem eved olam. That if they save him, he'll be their slave forever. Noach essentially swore that he'd be their slave. Now, Ma'asa Noach. Now, there's no room for Og in the Teva. What did Noach do to save him? Nakav chor echad b'teva. So he drilled a hole in the Teva. V'haya moshiko b'zono b'chol yom v'yom. And he would pass food to him through the hole every day. V'nishar gamhu. And that way he also remained alive. Shenemar, Kirak Og Melech HaBashan Nishar Mi Yeter Rafaim. As it says in the pasuk we just read, for only Og, the king of Bashan, remained from the giants. Meaning from the, what do you mean, remained from what? From before the flood. So Og survives the flood by holding on to the table. Holding on to the table. The Gemara in Nida just says he held on. The Gemara in Nida is discussing the fact that if the mabul, you ever hear the idea that the mabul was boiling water? So the Gemara asks, how did Og survive if the mabul was boiling water? Because it's very nice that he's holding on to the teva, but he's also getting boiled alive.
How did the fish survive?
So the Gemara discusses that there and says the fish went all the way down, and because heat rises, only the water near the top was boiling, the water down below was cooler. The Gemara discusses that explicitly. It's in that Gemara that it mentions this, and it says that Og, I don't know, okay. You explain the fish to me, now how about Og? And the Gemara sort of there assumes that you know that Og survived. Well, what about Og, who we know survived? Well, it answers that Hashem, that the walls of the Teva were cooler. And by holding onto the Teva, he was able to cool his body enough that he survived. But Og survives the Mabul by holding on to the Teva. No one else did. Og somehow survives. Now, we'll move now to and this is one of all the wild midrashic tales. This is one of the wildest. What? Masechet Sofrim. Masechet Sofrim. Okay? Masechet Sofrim. Here we go. So Masechet Sofrim is a book of Braitot that were recorded quite late. They were recorded probably during the era of the Gaonim, meaning after the closing of Shas. There were a number of what's called the Masechtot Katanot. In Torah research skills, some will learn about them. Masechtot Katanot, these books of Braitot, cover a lot of different topics, and some of them have a lot of halachic implications. None more so than Masechet Sofrim. A lot of the laws of Safrut, right, what Sofrim have to follow, come from Masechet Sofrim. And at the very, very end of Masechet Sofrim is the following Agadat. Ha'adam ha'gadol ba'anakim, the largest man ever, okay, Ze Avram Avinu. And that's obviously symbolic. Okay, Avram was the biggest guy ever. Shaya gavor komato keneged 74 nashim. That he was the same height. He was the height of 74 men. Va'achilato v'shtiyato kachaya. And Avram Avinu's food and drink was as follows: keneged 74 nashim. I'm sorry, 74. Did I say 72? 74. Yeah, and he ate what 74 men would eat. The kocha came, and so too his strength was the strength of 74 men. Masa, what did he do? Natal Shivasa b'nei Keturah. He took the 17 sons of Keturah, Banalahen Krach Shel Barzel, and he built them a city out of steel, out of iron. V'chnisan l'tocha. V'Hashemesh me'olam lo nichnas b'tocha, but the sun never shone on this town because he was too tall. He blocked the sun. Okay. Very strange. Now here we go. Og hu Eliezer. That just goes on here. The Masechet Sofrim says Og and Eliezer are the same person. Okay. It's interesting. Now there are midrashim that this doesn't work with. with Og and Eliezer being the same person. Okay? But there's such a thing as conflicting midrashim, because there are different themes and different messages. But it says here that Og is Eliezer. Uparsot raglav. Avram Avinu hayat tomno bekaf yado. And Avram Avinu was so big that Og's soles of his feet would fit into the palm of Avram Avinu's hand. Yeah. The soles of Og's feet would fit into the palms of Avram's hand. So Avram is even bigger than Og. Okay? Upamachat Ga'ar Bo. One time Avram Avinu yelled at Og. Got angry at him. Og's his servant, right? Umiyirato, and because he was so frightened by Avram Avinu, nafal mimenu sheino, one of his teeth fell out. Unetalo Avram Avinu, and Avram Avinu took it. Ve'asao mitot shehein shel shein, and Avram took that tooth of Og, and he made okay, there's a girsa change on the previous line, which is critical here. The Gra changes the line that says that Avram Avinu was bigger than Og. It flips that, the Gra flips that whole line around, which makes sense with this next line of the Medrash. I see why he does it. And he says that the previous line should read, no matter how big Avram was, the sole of Avram's foot would fit in Og's hand. That Og was even bigger. Okay, so sorry. So let's change that. The Gra, there's a little letter that changes the girsa. The Gra has Hagos and Masach Sofrim where it changes girsa. In Torah research, we'll talk about how the Gra knew all these different girsa. One of the stories about him traveling. Anyway, so here's what happens. Avram's huge. Og's even bigger. That's the basics so far. One time, and Og is Avram's servant. One time, Avram gets angry at Og. Og's tooth falls out of fear. Avram takes the tooth and makes a bed of ivory out of it.
Wow.
He takes it and he carves it into a bed. V'hayashen sham, and he would rest in it. He would take naps in it. Avram would sleep in a bed made out of Og's tooth. And some say that he didn't make a bed, but he made a chair. And would always sit there. That was Avram's chair. You know, people have their chair. Avram's chair was made out of Og's tooth. This is great. Umina Tanola Avraham. Very interesting question. Who gave Og to Avram? Now, the question sounds weird unless we remember the Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer. You got to read Chazals together sometimes. Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer says that Og essentially sold himself into slavery. Okay? So, where did Avram get Og from? We know that he was sold into slavery to Noah's sons, but where does Avram wind up with him? So it says here, Nimrod. Nimrod gave him to Avram. Now, there's another medrash that says that it talks about how Avram got him from Nimrod. Because what happened was, when Avram Avinu went into the fiery furnace, you know that story? It's also not in the Chumash. It's one of those midrashim that people think are part of the Chumash, because it's so famous. When Avram gets thrown into the fiery furnace, he survives. Nimrod is the king who throws him in. Nimrod is so impressed that Avram Avinu survives the fiery furnace, and he gives him as a present, as a gift, he gives him Og. Okay? V'halach Og, and Og went, u'bana shishim ayarot, and he built 60 cities. V'akatan shebahen, and the smallest one of them, haya govan shishim mil. The smallest one was 60 miles high. Which doesn't make any sense. Along with most of the other stuff in this medrash. Shneimar, and then he brings a pasuk here. Okay. Uma haya achilato. What did Og eat? What was the menu that Og ate? Elef shvarim. I don't know if this means per day, per week, per month, per year, but it says 1,000 oxen. You ever see how much meat is in a single cow? Anyone ever see how much meat is in a single cow? You can feed hundreds of people. Hundreds of people from the meat of a single cow. Just think of it this way: when you sit down in someone's home, let's say they put out a roast this big. How many people can eat from that roast? What? 10? 15? Okay. You know how big a cow is? How many of those there are? Okay. You could feed hundreds of people from a cow. That's emes. Okay. So he would eat 1,000 oxen. V'chein kol min chaya, and he would also eat every type of animal. He ate everything. Okay. V'shtiyato elef midot, and he ate 1,000 times what a normal person would drink. Uma shayta tipat zri'ato 36 litrin, and a drop of his sperm was 36 liters. He's a big boy. Og was a big boy. Apparently, Chazal want us to know that Og was very, very large and very, very strong, ate a lot, and was very, very potent. This is important to Chazal. Now, I'm not kidding around. This is actually very, very... Chazal don't throw in a detail like that, stop. It actually has a very important... You'll see that there are other midrashim that once we know this midrash, what happens in the other midrashim will make a lot of sense. Okay? You'll see. You see, the interconnection of these midrashim is fascinating. Okay? And now, another midrash goes on to stuff about Yosef and other things. Okay, that's the end of the Og part of the midrash. So far in the life of Og, we have that he was born, he was huge. He had an iron crib that was very, very big. So the Torah, for some reason, has an interest, even if we just take the pasuk at face value with no midrashim, for some reason the Torah tells us how large this human being was. And that he was very, very big. The Torah, for some reason, wants us to know Og was very large. Okay? We're then told that he survives the Mabul, but not because he was a tzaddik and he was in the Teva with Noach and his family, but because he was a big boy and he hung on to the Teva. Okay? And then we're told that he was at some point the servant of Nimrod. He was a servant of, I guess, the leadership people. He was the servant of Nimrod, and as a result of the fact that Avram survived the fiery furnace, he was given as a gift to Avram. He then lived in fear of Avram, so much so that when Avram yelled at him one time, his tooth fell out.
I still don't get how that falls out just out of fear. Like when you get scared.
He was trembling terribly. I don't know.
I guess he was like, his teeth were shattering.
I don't know. You'll see later on, he has other problems with his teeth. Og has other problems with his teeth. We'll see. So his tooth falls out. Actually, I'll explain to you what it means later on. Don't worry, we'll get to all the symbolism. And then that medrash goes on to tell us how massively, massively, massively massive he is. How much he eats, how much he drinks, and how strong he is, and how virile he is, and he's just like the biggest, strongest dude ever. Okay? Fine. He's Avram's servant now. The Chazal sees on an allusion in the text to him in Parshas Lech Lecha. In Parshas Lech Lecha, there's a pasuk that says that when Avram had the war with the kings, you know that war that he got involved in with the 4 kings and the 5 kings, whatever it is. What? So when he got involved in those kings, in a war, his nephew Lot was taken captive. And the pasuk there says, "Vayichud Lot," they took Lot captive, and it says the nephew of Avram. Vayavo hapalit vayaged laAvram. How did Avram find out that Lot was taken captive? Says the pasuk, the palit. The word palit is the Hebrew word for refugee. A person who survives. The survivor. The refugee. It doesn't say vayavo palit. A refugee came, which would make sense if you're telling the story. So the vayavo hapalit, the refugee, the survivor, came and told Avram that Lot was taken captive. So Chazal sees on this and they say, who's the survivor? Gemara Maseches Nida actually appears in a few places. We'll do it from Bereshis Rabbah. In Bereshis Rabbah, so the Gemara mentions it in Maseches Nida, but in Bereshis Rabbah it also mentions it, and more extensively we're going to read another little story. So this is the next occurrence in Og's life that we are aware of, is Og coming to tell Avram that Lot was taken captive. Okay, he's called Hapalit. Why? Because he wasn't just a survivor. This is the guy who survived the Mabul. Like there's Noach and his family survived the Mabul because God saved them. But then there's the guy who survived. See that guy? He survived the Mabul. Okay, like so he was the survivor. And that's what the Gemara Masechet Nida says. Hapalit shepalat midora Mabul. That he survived the Mabul. Or Mea Mabul, survived the Mabul. Now, in Bereshis Rabbah, on the words Vayavo Palit, find it. Please bear with me. Here we go. Almost there. I'm sorry, I'm just like push a little bit down a lot. Here we go. Vayavo Palit. Okay, you ready for this? This is a doozy. Vayavo Palit. Reish Lakish b'shem Bar Kapar. Reish Lakish said in the name of Bar Kapar. Who Og? Who Palit? Og and the Palit is the same person. Lama Nikrash Og. Why is his name Og? Shebao Matzat Avram Yoshev Osek Mitzvot Ugot. When he came, he found Avram involved in the mitzvah of Ugot, cakes. Or circles. It could also be Agugah, it could also be circles. I don't know. Who lo nit kavein? That's not our subject. I don't know what it means. Who lo nit kavein l'shem shemayim? Og, when he came to tell Avram that Lot was taken captive, did not have good intentions. He was actually up to something. Ella Amar, rather, he said to himself, Avram ze konyon. Avram is a konyon is a word that, in the word like kinyan, he owns a lot of stuff. He's a wealthy man. Now I'm going to tell him that his nephew was taken captive. He'll go to war, and he'll get killed. And then I'll marry Sarah. That's what the Medrash says. Og's motive in telling Avram that Lot was taken captive was to get Avram to go into battle, get killed, and marry Sarah. Take over. What?
It worked for David.
Amalei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to him, Chayecha. He says, by your life, Og, Schar psiotecha tanotel. He said, I'm going to give you a reward for the fact that you came and told Avram. She'at ma'arich yamim ba'olam. That you're going to live a long life. Va'al shechashavta la'rog et hatzadik. But because you wanted to kill this tzaddik, chayecha, by your life, she'ata ro'eh elef alafim v'ribei revavot mivnei banav. You're going to see thousands and tens of thousands of his offspring. You wanted to kill him and take his wife? I'm going to make you live a long time. That's a bracha. But you know what? You're going to see multitudes that emerge from this guy who you wanted to bump off. The aim sofo shel oto haish lipol ela biyadan. And your end is going to be that you're going to die at their hands. Rish Lakish. What? Who said that? God said that to Oh, yes. Now, so far, we have big boy, how he became Avram's slave, living in fear of Avram. But Now we see here that he would like to get rid of Avram and take over, take Sarah.
He was still asleep.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Eliezer remains Avram's slave for quite some time afterwards. Deep into Yitzchak's life, of course, he finds Yitzchak's wife. Okay? And Og and Eliezer is the same person. Okay? So now let's take a look at a medrash. Now this idea, when I read this medrash, when I was reading about Og, about Og trying to take Sarah, it started to clue me in to what Chazal meant that Og and Eliezer are the same person, because it reminded me of two other midrashim about Eliezer. The fact that he wanted to marry Sarah reminded me of two midrashim about Eliezer, and I'm going to put these midrashim in chronological order. Okay? Of course, Avram did not get killed in the war. He and Sarah had a child by the name of Yitzchak, and God tells Avram to go take Yitzchak and bring him as a carbon. Well, what happens? There's a medrash in the Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer, back to that book, and it says that, it mentions in the story of the Akedah that when Avram and Yitzchak are going to the Akedah, that it says, Vayikach et shnei ne'arav ito. He brought his two attendants. With Na'ar doesn't always mean a boy, it can also mean an attendant. That he brought the two servants came with them. And who does the Medrash say the two servants were who came with Avram and Yitzchak? Eliezer and Yishmael. Yishmael, who, after having been banished from home years earlier, has come back and accepted his status as a second-class citizen in the home, and he's one of the servants now. Okay? Because he is the son of a maidservant. So Yishmael and Eliezer are accompanying Yitzchak and Avram to the Akedah. That's the story, and it's a whole long story in Pirkei Eliezer. It's a fascinating story. And it says as follows. Nichnas tacharut bein Eliezer ben Yishmael. Eliezer and Yishmael started competing with each other. Like as they're walking, it's like a teal, like they're hiking along, and the way it is when you're walking, that sometimes like you can be separated by a few yards. Like you're not all bunched together. People sort of hang back from the pack or whatever. So, Omer Yishmael Eliezer. Yishmael said to Eliezer, Achshav Avraham makriv et Yitzchak beno le'olah mogdal al gavi mizbeach. He says, Yishmael says to Eliezer, he says, Eliezer, Avram's about to go kill Yitzchak. Va'ani hu bechoro. I'm the firstborn son. Va'ani yoreshet Avram. I'm going to inherit everything. So Eliezer answered him and says, no. He already banished you from the house, like a woman who's divorced and banished. What are you talking about? You're not going to inherit anything. You were already banished and you came back as a slave. Why would you inherit everything? But I'm like the head servant. I'm the butler of the house. I serve him day and night. I'm going to inherit Avram. So these two guys are arguing over who's going to cash in. Like, what's about to happen is like the greatest spiritual moment of encounter between man and God. And they're like debating who's gonna cash in, who's gonna make a buck off of this. Okay? Baruch HaKodesh Mishiva Otam V'Omeret Lahem, and the Holy Spirit was saying, Lo Zeh Yoresh v'Lo Zeh Yoresh. Neither of you are getting anything. Bayom HaShlishi Higiu L'Tzofim. The third day they got to Har Tzofim, they got to the place where you can see Har Habayit from. When they got to this outlook, to this place Tzofim, Ra'ah Kavod HaShechina Omed Al Gabei Har. Avram Avinu saw the Shechina stand on the mountain. Something shining there. Mara, what did he see? Ra'a amud shel ish mina aretz al shamayim. He saw a pillar of fire going from earth up to heaven. Amar li Yitzchak beno. So he said to Yitzchak, his son, Beni, my son, ro'eh ata klum be'echad min ha'arim halalu? He said, Yitzchak, you see anything? Amar lo, hey. He said, yeah, sure. Amar lo, he said, what do you see? Amar lo mata roeh, what did you see? Amar lo, he said, ani roeh amud shel ish omed al haaretz ad l'shamayim. He says, I see a pillar of fire going from earth to heaven. Vehivin Avram kinirtzah nar lola. So Avram understood that Yitzchak was at the level to be an offering to God. Amar li Yishmael leEliezer. They obviously didn't overhear the first part of the conversation. They were probably hanging back a few feet. Avram turns to Yishmael and Eliezer and he says to them, Ro'im atem klum b'echad min ha'arim halalu? You see anything on the mountains in front of you? Amru lo, no. He said, no. We don't see anything. Chashavotam kachamorim. So Avram thought of them as donkeys. Va'amar lehem, and he said to them, Shvu lachem po im hachamor. You sit here with the donkey. Amar lehem, he said to them, Kishem she'en hachamor ro'eh klum. Just like the donkey doesn't see anything, kach atem enchem ro'im klum. So too, you don't see anything.
Actually, donkeys see more than that.
Check it. Why? Now, what does it mean, chamorim? The word chamor, donkey, is from the same shorish as the word chomer. It means material, materialism. Okay? A donkey is a chamor because it carries a heavy load of stuff. Gashmius. Chomer is material, physicality. That's what it means. You're just like the chamor. In other words, if you look at the whole story, the previous conversation, the second conversation, Avram and Yitzchak are involved in trying to get close to the Shekhinah. That's what they're looking for. They're looking for the connection between heaven and earth. The Shekhinah on the mountain, the pillar going from heaven to earth to heaven. And what are these guys worried about? Chomer. Who's going to get the money? Who's going to inherit all the stuff? That's what their heads are at. He says, where's your head at? Your head is with the donkey. It's with the physicality. But if we're going to continue our theme, so if Og and Eliezer are the same person, we're going to accept that premise in the Midrashim here. That's what the Midrash told us in Masechet Sofrim. So first he tries to bump off Avram to marry Sarah. Okay, that didn't work. Now Avram's got a kid, so bumping off Avram doesn't do anything because there's an heir to the throne. But if the heir to the throne gets bumped off, maybe I could take his place. Right? The next medrash that it reminded me of when I saw this thing about him trying to marry Sarah is a medrash that's quoted by Rashi in Parshat Chaisar. When Avram sends Eliezer, and we look at him a little differently now, don't we? Sends Og/Eliezer. When he sends him to go find a wife for Yitzchak, he makes him swear that he will not take a daughter from the land of Canaan. And Yitzchak and Eliezer says to Avram. Now, by the way, Eliezer's name is not mentioned in Chaisar. Throughout Chaisar, it never says the name Eliezer. We were all taught it's Eliezer. It just says Eved Avram. Okay, so we could just as easily call him Og, as far as we're concerned. It's the servant of Avram, whoever that servant is. It's Og, it's Eliezer, same guy. And he says to Avram, Ulai lo toveh. Where is it? It's written twice. It's the second time it's written. Here we go. You see what happens is it's written twice. It's written once when he actually says to Avram, perhaps you won't come with me. And then the second time when Eliezer is retelling the story, you know, when he's in Lavan and Bethuel's house, he tells them the play-by-play of the whole command that he got from his master Avram. And there, in Pasuk Lamed Tet, Perach Avdallah Pasuk Lamed Tet of Bereshit, it says, Va'omar al Adoni, and I said to my master, Ulai lo telecha isha acharai. Maybe she won't want to go with me. What should I do then? Now on this question, Ulai, the first time it's written with a Vav. Aleph Vav Lamed Yud. The second time it's written without a Vav. Which means that it could also be read as Eli, to me. So the psychology of what is behind Eliezer's question, well, what do I do if I can't find anyone? What do I do if she doesn't want to come with me? What then? What's the psychology behind it? Says Rashi, Eli Ktiv, it's written to me. Bat Haitalo Eliezer. Eliezer had a daughter. And he was searching to find a strategy. That Avram would tell him to marry his daughter to Yitzchak. Amarlo Avraham, so Avraham said to him, Beni Baruch v'ata arur, my son is blessed, you are cursed. Ve'ein arur medabek b'baruch. And that something cursed cannot attach itself to something blessed. Please. Thank you very, very much. So now, if we look at this in the context of the other midrashim we saw, we have a great theme going here. He tries to bump off Avram by getting him killed in war. That doesn't work. He tries to. He's thinking, okay, maybe if Avram actually goes through with it and kills Yitzchak, I'll inherit everything. That doesn't happen. Okay, maybe I can get my daughter to marry Yitzchak, and then he's trying to get himself into this family, to this status. He's trying to usurp the throne, as it were, of this chosen line. That doesn't work either. Okay, so what next? So now we move to Dvarim Rabbah. What? Oh yeah, he's very persistent. We'll talk about that at the end. Dvarim Rabbah.
Why does he pray to find?
No, he believes in God. Here we go. In Dvarim Rabbah, there's a bunch of stuff about oath here. Listen to this. So it retells the story about how he saved Lod. You with me, Phil? Phil? Should I wait for you? Should I wait for you? We're starting another story. Okay. At the time that Lot was taken captive, Og came, Uba Og Biseret Avraham. Amar Reish Lakish Ber Kapara tells it says that he wanted to marry Sarah. Okay, so it says that again, and then it continues. God says, I also judged him in the days of Yitzchak. When Avram circumcised Yitzchak, he made a feast, and he called all the kings of Canaan. Af Og Hayasham. Now Og was also there. Of course he was there. Lived in Avram's house. So at Yitzchak's bris, the following conversation takes place. Botasha Amrula Og. So at that moment, some of the people at the bris, they said to Og, Lo kach hayita omer Avram pirda karahu ve'no molid. Didn't you, Og, used to say that Avram is an impotent mule? You know, a mule can't have kids. You guys know that? Right? Like if a mule is sterile. Didn't you used to say that he's a sterile mule? Apparently Og used to say behind Avram's back. Because think about it, like him and his wife, they're in their 90s, 80s, 70s, 80s, they ain't having kids. They're as sterile as a mule. So these guys turn to Og, they're all sitting there, they're having a beer, they're at the bris. Hey, didn't you used to say that he ain't never gonna have kids? Given Sharai Yitzchak, Amar, Ma'uzain's a clue. So what did Og say to them? Oh, come on, this kid, he's nothing. But I can kill him with my finger. Amar lo Kodesh Baruch Hu, so Kodesh Baruch Hu said to him, Kach Amarta? That's what you're saying? Al Menat Shetirei al Afimu Revavot Yotzim Mimenu. You're going to see, because of this, you're going to see tens of thousands come out of it. V'yadam oto Aisha Tigdibo, and you're going to die at their hands, like we saw before. Now it goes on. Davar Acher, that Pesachti Adino b'mot Yaakov. God says, I judged him in the days of Yaakov. Now we get our next Og story. In the days of Yaakov. B'sha'ashi nichnas Yaakov etzel Paro, l'barechoto. When Yaakov came down to Egypt, he goes into Paro. You remember he's an old man, and Paro says, wow, you're so old, and he gives Paro a bracha. Everyone familiar with that scene? It's a scene in the Chumash. So when Yaakov goes in to give Paro the bracha, Haya Og Yoshev Sham. Og was hanging out there. Og's around. Okay? Og was hanging out there in Paro's chambers. Botasha Amar lo Paro lo Og. So Paro turns to Og and he says, Lo kach hayita omer Avram pirda karahu ve'no molid. Didn't you used to say that Avram was a sterile mule and he ain't never gonna have kids? Hey, Og. You know, Og's an important guy. He's hanging out in the king's chambers in Egypt. He says, "Hey, Og, you used to say that these guys are never gonna have kids. This is his grandson. Harei b'no v'shivim nefesh mi'reicho." Here's his grandson and 70 of his offspring. So that's when Og got an ayin hara on them. He gave them the evil eye. That's when he said, like, I can't take it anymore. Amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ey Rasha, what a Rasha. Mata machnis ayin ra b'fanai. You're looking with the evil eye on my children. And then he says, Teimas eino shel oto aish. Your eye should melt. Atido to aish lipol biyadan. You, always says oto aish, says, but you are going to fall into their hands. Harei ki biyadcha natati oto. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yisrael. God said to Israel, listen to the end of the Medrash, it's critical. Kishem sheba'olam hazeh hayu umot ha'olam shomin shomachem u'mityarim u'mitavdim mikem. Just like in this world, other nations who would hear of you would fear you, saying to the Jewish people, kach la'atid lavo, so too in the future. People are going to see that the name of God is called upon you, and they will fear you. So we have Og calling Avram a sterile mule and having to live to see his offspring.
Don't you see that every time you try something?
Two more stories, and then we wrap it up. Okay. The next story is actually in the piece of Medrash right before the one I just read you. The one I just read you was sort of a spin-off, going back in time on this story. Now we're moving way ahead in time. We left off by Yaakov in Paro's chamber. The next time we see Og is the actual story in the Chumash, where Og, Klal Yisrael are coming, they're at Ever Yarden, they're starting to conquer the land of Israel, and they're about to go in. So what happens? Here we go. Ba'u Moshe v'Yisrael l'tchuma l'kanes l'edrei. Moshe and the Jewish people arrive at the border of Israel, by Edrei, at the border of the Ever Yarden, the piece of land they're going to conquer, be the beginning of the land of Israel. Amar lahem Moshe, Nachnekan. Moshe said, let's camp here. Vanu nichnasim b'shacharit. And we'll go in the morning. We'll attack in the morning. We'll go in. Ba'u likanes l'edrei. They came to enter Edrei. V'adayin lo hayta ayin ro'ah. And it was before dawn. You couldn't see yet. It was too dark outside. Tala Moshe et einav. Moshe picked up his eyes. V'ra'ah et Og yoshev ala choma. And he saw Og sitting on the walls of the city. You know, like sitting on the edge of the walls of the city. Imagine like you see the old city walls of Jerusalem, there's a guy sitting up there. V'raglav magiot la'aretz. And his legs reached all the way down to the ground. So Og is like sitting on the wall of the city, like sitting on a bench. With his legs all the way down on the ground.
Big boy.
Okay, he's a big boy. Amar Moshe. Moshe said, Eini yodea mani ro'eh. Moshe said, I don't know what I'm seeing. Choma acheret banu elu balayla. Did they build another wall at night? It's like dark outside. He sees this huge thing. What is this? Amar le'HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Moshe, zeh shata ro'ehu Og. God says, Moshe, that ain't a wall. That's Og. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Borach raglav yuched amot. Rabbi Yochanan says his legs were 18 amot long. Okay. Otasha nityarei Moshe. At that moment, Moshe was very afraid. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, al tityarei. Shani mapilo lefanecha. God says, don't be afraid. I'm going to bring him into your hands. It quotes a pasuk where God says to Moshe, don't be afraid. Now, Og haya tolesh har v'zorek al Yisrael. So what was Og doing? Og would pick up a mountain, throw it at the Jewish people. Moshe haya notel tzror, and Moshe would pick up a pebble. Umazkir alav shema mefurash, and he would say God's explicit name. He would say God's name. V'somcha, and he would melt the mountain. Like, with the name of Hashem, and these mountains that Og was throwing at the Jewish people. So this is like this battle. Og's like uprooting a mountain, you know, and Moshe's like with the Shem Hashem. Okay? one more story. Okay. Final story, and it'll be quite clear why it's the final story, because it's the story of Og's death, is at the end of Masechet Brachot. Here we go. Gemara Gemirle, we have a tradition about this story. It means it's not from any specific person, and the Gemara is just an old traditional story. That's what Gemara Gemirle means. Amar, Og said, Machne Yisrael Kamahavi, Tlata Parsi. The camp of Israel, how big was it? It was 3 parses big. Ezel v'iyah kartura. I'm going to go, I'll uproot a mountain. You see, this is a companion to that medrash that says he was picking up mountain. I'll go uproot a mountain, Bar Tlata Parsi, that's 3 parses big, meaning, how big are the Jewish people? Okay, I'll get a mountain that big. V'ishdi alayu, and I'll throw it on the Victorino and I'll kill them all. Azal akartura, he went and he uprooted a mountain, Bar Tlata Parsi, 3 parses large. V'aiti al Reishi, and he was holding it over his head. Like, he picks it up and he's ready to throw it at the Jewish people. Aiti kuchabrichu, God came alei upon him. I'm sorry. Aiti kuchabrichu alei kamti. God brought upon him termites. He loaded up this mountain with termites, and termites start eating away at the thing, right? V'nikvua, and they made all sorts of holes. V'nachik b'tzavarei, so it collapsed around his neck. Havabayla mishlafa, so he's trying to push it off now. It's like around his neck, like it's stuck on his neck, on his head, whatever. It's stuck. Bayla mishlafa, he wanted to push it off. Mashchishine, it got caught in his teeth, and it's pulling on his teeth. Lahaiki, so Lahaiki said, it was pulling his teeth in 2 different directions. But he couldn't get it off. Moshe Kamahava. Now, how tall was Moshe? Eser Amot. Moshe was 10 Amot tall. Shakal Narga Bar Eser Amot. He took an axe that was 10 amos tall. Shavar Eser Amot. He jumped 10 amos. Okay, besides the fact that there's no way Moshe was 10 amos tall, it's crazy. It's impossible for any human being to jump their own height. You cannot jump your own height. It's impossible. Okay? I mean, I suppose like there could be some like pole vault, but just like to jump up the height of your own. Okay, anyway, he jumped his own height. Umachye bekarsule. Right, and he hit him on his ankle, the katle, and that killed him.
Oh.
Okay. Now there's other, by the way, this is by no means every place where Chazal talk about how big Og was. Everywhere Og is mentioned, we see that he's very, very large. Og's a big guy. Now, let's put the whole thing together. I'm going to quickly run through the chronology, and then say what the theme is. And then we'll be done. Og's very large. He's very, very, very large. Everywhere we're told about him, we're told how unbelievably huge he is. The numbers don't all add up. Before we were told his legs were 18 amos tall, and now we're told that Moshe was 10 amos tall, and he jumped 10 amos, and he reached 10 amos, and he got to his ankle. So obviously, forget about the numbers. Okay, there's another medrash, there's Gemara Mesefas Nida that says that this rabbi was running after a deer, and he was running for three parsas, which is like 3 miles, and the whole time he was within the pelvic bone of Og. The numbers don't all match. Don't worry about that. Og was ridiculously large. He was huge. He survived the Mabul. Now what does that mean? Here's a guy. Think about it. How did Noach survive the Mabul? He was a tzaddik. A nes. How did Og survive the Mabul? His own brute strength. He was a beast. That's how he survived the Mabul. Imagine there are people a few generations afterwards who see like old man Noach or Shem or Ham or Yefet walking down the street. And they go, you see that person? He survived the Mabul. How did he survive the Mabul? God saved him. But then you see the Og. How did he survive the mountain?
Saved himself.
Saved himself. It's very interesting. Og then becomes a servant to Noach and his family. Subsequently, we see him as a servant of Avram, living in Avram's shadow and in fear of him. Now, a tooth. Okay. When we're told that he was Avram, I'll get to the teeth in a minute. When we're told that he's Avram's servant, we're told that he lives in fear of Avram. We're also told how much he eats and how potent he is. Remember, I said that would become important later on. In those other midrashim, he apparently would go around talking about how Avram was sterile, how Avram couldn't have kids, and Avram was sterile. So that's why the Medrash over there, Masechet Sofrim, tells us Davka how potent he was. Og symbolizes physical greatness. Physically speaking, there was no one ever greater. What is physical greatness? Size, strength, potency, physical power. There is no physical specimen more impressive than Og. Who does he stand opposite? He survives the Mabul, Noach survives the Mabul. How does Noach survive the Mabul? Through righteousness. How does he survive the Mabul? Through physicality. He then stands in the shadow of Avram. Avram is physically smaller than him, but he's master over him. Avram is a spiritual giant. Avram is the spiritual giant who by nature, Noach doesn't survive by nature, he survives by being supernatural. Og survives by nature. Avram can't have kids by nature. He's a sterile mule. He has kids when he's an old man, when people, even normal people can't have kids then. Forget about someone who couldn't have kids his whole life. Avram is a sterile mule naturally. How does he have a kid? Supernaturally. Og is naturally very potent. Og, throughout his life, his early life especially, is trying to triumph over and try to take over and become the primary. He wants to be the chosen one. He wants to be the one who's... He lives in Avram's house. He knows what Avram's all about and the promises and what Avram's family is, and that's the chosen family and the chosen people. He wants to be the head of that. And he wants to be... He's always trying... So he's trying to replace Avram. He's trying to replace Yitzchak. Right? He's trying to replace them. Ultimately, he tries to block Am Yisrael from entering Eretz Yisrael. And he's killed by the giver of the Torah. And how is he killed? First, there's a battle where he is bringing size and mass and brute strength, throwing mountains to destroy the Jewish people, and those mountains are being defeated by what? By spirituality, by the Word of God. Starting to see the theme? Og represents physical might and physical greatness, the body. Think about people who be into bodybuilding. And I was into weights when I was in high school. I remember every now and then doing these exercise magazines, these guys with big muscles. There are people who are enamored of strength. And we all are to a certain extent. We're all enamored of great physical specimens, whether they be of beauty or of strength. It's impressive. And we're blown away by it. Tall people always get elected president. You guys probably have heard these statistics. The taller president, the taller candidate usually wins the election. You know this? You ever heard this? Ever since the advent of television, the taller presidential candidate has always won, except when Bush defeated Kerry. And also when he defeated Gore. The two presidential elections that George W. won, he beat someone taller than him. He's the only person who ever was the only time that the shorter candidate won. Big people impress us. It's just a natural thing human beings have. We're impressed by physicality. Why? Because we have bodies and we have souls. And we spend our whole lives torn between them. We have a spiritual side, we have a physical side. And there's something very impressive to us about physical greatness, physical strength, physical beauty, power, physical power. Og is the epitome of physical greatness. Noah, Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Moshe, all the people he stands opposite are the epitome in their time of spiritual greatness. The struggle between and Og's proper place is to be serving, is to be the servant to Avram. What does that mean? The proper place of physical might, physical strength isn't supposed to be destroyed. Physical strength is supposed to be subservient to the soul, subservient to the spirituality. That's when everything is the way it's supposed to be. When the physical might is being controlled by the spiritual greatness. That's the way things are supposed to be. But the body never stops. The physical side never stops trying to be the one in charge and trying to suppress the spirituality and trying to take over. It's always trying to do that inside every one of us. It's always trying. The Og, the being impressed with the physicality and being enamored of it and caring more about it, is always trying to overwhelm our spiritual side, our Avram and our Noach and our Tzaddik and our Tamim. It's always trying to do that. And ultimately, the defeat of the physicality, the real defeat of it, is the Torah. The giver of the Torah is the one who finally puts an end to this, as he's trying to prevent us from crossing the finish line and enter into the Holy Land. So that's the theme. Ogu Eliezer, in that one little statement, Chazal connect a whole bunch of midrashim to a whole bunch of other midrashim. Ogu Eliezer. Because there's a shared theme here. There's living in the shadow. So long as Og, the physical might, is Eliezer. What does Eliezer mean? El is God, but it also means power, is my helper. As long as Og is in the role of Eliezer, of being the helper of Avram, everything's fine. Now I believe the issue with the tooth is that the tooth is a sign of his animal side, of his animalism. So that when he's most subservient to Avram, he loses his attack, he loses his bite, he loses his aggressiveness. It's gone. His tooth falls out. He's rendered unable. So we survive supernaturally. We're impotent mules who by all laws of nature shouldn't make it. And we survive supernaturally. Og survives naturally. There were Og fans, you better believe it, looking around going, wow, look at this guy, he's so old and he's so big and he's so powerful. He's so great physically. The same people who today read the bodybuilding magazine are like, wow, that guy developed that little muscle that I've never seen before. Wow, he's huge. Okay? That's not who we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be enamored of the Avram Avinu and say, wow, he's a gadol. That's who we're supposed to be looking at as great. That's the struggle between Og and Avram. Og and Moshe. It's our own struggle. Inside every one of us. Good night.
Couple questions.